Hi, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Behold podcast on the Genre Equality channel. My name is Hitzir.
I'm Isa.
And if you're not familiar, Behold is actually a spin off of the Genre Equality show. We sort of realized, our Genre Equality channel, which was, based on the Genre Equality podcast, was sort of limited to sci fi, horror, fantasy, animation, that kind of stuff. And over the ensuing years, since we started the podcast, we
Yep.
started to have the urge to talk about other things, that don't involve like superheroes or ghosts or wizards or things like that. So not that we have anything against it, of course, because we run genre equality, we love that kind of stuff, lah. But there are things outside of that realm that we would like to talk about. So Behold is a podcast where we basically pimp out the pop culture that we love. It's not necessarily genre,
hmm
not necessarily current.
Yep.
A lot of our topics are old, decades old, in fact, or years old. Indie films, old series, classic books, things like that. All of it is up for grabs, And if you're not familiar with us, my name is Hitzir. We run the Genre Equality podcast.
hmm
For myself, I'm a freelance journalist. I used to cover music with Bandwagon and Juice. These days, I cover film and television criticism over at Enemy Asia and in Popwire. And I also podcast about pro wrestling if you're interested in that sort of thing. In at the Hard Hits Wrestling podcast, you can find me there as well. What about you, Isa?
Yeah. So I'm Isa. These days, I'm basically just like watching the stuff that Hits wants me to watch, so we can talk about them. But
Yeah.
most I do that mostly. I do a bit of writing on the side. I do a bit of music on the side as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for under my own blank verse moniker, as well as like helping up Syndicate
Mm.
to do some music stuff. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, pretty much. As you can probably notice, we our relationship was based on music lah. But then obviously like we can't talk about music all the time. I myself have kind of lost interest in music, so which is why I shifted my career from music journalism to film and TV and other things of that sort. And this is kind of what the podcast is based on. Like it's just like all my podcasts are just friends sitting around talking about the stuff that we like. It's not the most polished podcast out there. It's not essay form or anything. It's just conversations. It's gonna be very natural. So forgive us if we make some mistakes or we don't have facts off the top of our heads. It's just our opinions and stuff. And for this episode, we'll be talking about three things that were inspired or spun off iconic films.
hmm
We'll be talking about Fargo, we'll be talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and we'll be talking about Cobra Kai. And if you're wondering why these three topics were combined, it's because we wanted to talk about some of our beloved iconic films
Yep.
that for one reason or another, decades later, sometimes 10, 20, 30 years later, find new life in a television medium. And I found it really interesting because these shows are not remakes, number one.
Yep.
Like there are a lot of shows that remake old movies. No, these are not it. These are canon expansions. The Fargo series is set in the Fargo universe of the Coen Brothers. Ratched, currently out on Netflix, is a prequel of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Cobra Kai, obviously a decades later sequel to the Karate Kid franchise. And
hmm
and the reason these three topics are chosen is because they present different aspects of that in terms of success,
Yep.
like the artistic success of the spin-offs. Like for example, Fargo we would consider to be a worthy continuation, a very nice expansion
hmm
of the same level, of the same quality as the Coen Brothers iconic film.
Absolutely.
With respect to Ratchet,
Uh,
this is not how you do it. Ratchet is how it is the absolute wrong way to spin off an iconic film. It's a disgrace to its legacy, and we'll get into that as well. Whereas Cobra Kai, one of the unique instances where a show decades later with no expectations that people thought was gonna suck ended up being richer. Like it enhances the original franchise and
mhm.
indeed ends up kind of improving upon the original franchise, which was campy and silly but fun. Whereas Cobra Kai maybe has a bit more substance
Yeah.
to it than the original Karate Kid franchise.
hmm
So we'll be getting into that right now. And I do realize that there are other shows that we could talk about here that were spun off from films. Some of you may be wondering why I won't talk about, say, Hannibal.
Hmm.
Number one, Hannibal isn't a spin-off of
Yeah.
Silence of the Lambs. It is a remake or an adaptation of the books that Silence of the Lambs was based on. So it's not set in that cinematic universe. It's a different take on it.
Hmm.
You may be wondering why we're not talking about Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. That's because we already did. If you want to listen to our Dark Crystal Age of Resistance review, which is an amazing prequel to the Dark Crystal film, you can listen to Genre Equality 22. We have a really substantial review on
Hmm.
that.
Yep.
Sadly, did you hear the Age of Resistance was cancelled?
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, like, I understand that it probably didn't reach the kind of numbers that Netflix wanted to do, but
Mm.
it's tragedy, honestly, right?
Yeah.
Just like that's one less, avenue for puppetry as an art form to kind of like
Hmm.
um, reach us, right? And like, oh man, I get it. I understand that Netflix works in a particular way, but still, it's very sad.
Yeah, Netflix obviously facing some financial difficulties due to COVID. Not in terms of putting shows out, but in terms of producing films
Hmm.
and producing shows. For example, like one of my favorite shows, Glow, has recently been cancelled. The reason for that cancellation is that they can't hold these actors on retainer and keep paying them and not be producing.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the case with a lot of the shows that are currently being cancelled right now,
Hmm.
which is sad. Age of Resistance, such an honor and tribute to Jim Henson. It does exactly what Jim Henson would want it to do. It has practical effects, practical puppetry, and you rarely see anything like that out today. Which kind of brings me. This is kind of a side note. If you do want to watch something with puppets, you should go on Disney Plus and you watch a talk show called Earth to Net. Uh, Earth to Net is a show about an alien who was sent to invade Earth, sort of a scouting party for an alien invasion.
Uh-huh.
But he ends up falling in love with pop culture on Earth and decides to run a talk show to talk to celebrities about their art and stuff like what makes comedy comedy. He doesn't understand sarcasm, etc. Like things like that. It's a very interesting talk show format that I really loved, and it has the Jim Henson type puppetry with the aliens and stuff. So do check that out if you want to lah. That's really cool. I can't exactly cover it on genre because it's not technically genre,
Uh,
but it's
uh,
more of a talk show lah
yeah.
with an alien conceit. Anyways, let's get into our first topic of the evening. We'll be talking about Fargo. Um, Fargo, originally an amazing 1996 black comedy crime thriller, written and produced and directed by Joe and Ethan Coen. It starred Francis McDormand, William H. Macy, Steve Buscemi,
Hmm.
Peter Somar, and it was truly one of the most iconic crime comedies out there lah, of the last maybe 30 years.
Yeah.
And it has since been spun off into the fictional universe it's set in has since been spun off into a seasonal anthology show run by one of the most audacious TV auteurs, I would say,
Hmm.
of the 21st century in Noah Hawley, who has also showrun Legion and he does Fargo here as well. If you're unfamiliar with what a seasonal anthology is, think American Horror Story. Every season takes place with a new storyline, new characters, new contexts. But it takes place in the same world. In the case of Fargo, some of it takes place after the film Fargo,
Hmm.
some of it takes place before, and as is the case with our first spin-off, I actually think that Fargo is a very worthy continuation. I think Noah Hawley really captures the the tone, the humor, the pathos, the sense of the quirky essence of what Fargo is lah,
Yeah.
and really revels in it. There's a lot to savor here. Noah Hawley, I think, is I I don't know how to say that. I think
Yeah.
visually, Noah Hawley is a better filmmaker than the Coen Brothers is, at least in terms of quirky flourishes lah.
Yeah.
I would say the Coen Brothers overall are better filmmakers than Noah Hawley, and that's no diss to Hawley.
Hmm.
Coen Brothers obviously one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. But I think visually, Fargo the series stands above Fargo the film.
Yeah.
On that first point, would you say that's a decent summation?
Y-
Like, is that something fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. Definitely Fargo the series has a bit more. of a polish, right? That
Mm,
is a bit counter to what the Coen Brothers' usual look and feel is like.
mm,
Like a lot of Coen Brothers stuff, we get a lot of like, I mean, it looks like film, it feels like film. Whenever you watch a Coen Brothers movies, and Fargo is a very quintessential Coen Brother movie.
hmm.
And of course shot by the amazing Roger Deakins.
Yeah.
So there is a signature look to what a Coen Brothers film looks like, and at the
Hmm.
same time there is something very uh quirky to the way that Hawley likes stuff to be done, right?
Yep. Yep.
As we can see with Legion and stuff like that. So I think it's an interesting visual take on the same kind of tone that we get from the original film.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason why it's been so popular uh, is because of that, like that difference, right? I feel
Hmm.
like the way that Holly is framing everything and the way everything is kind of shot appeals a bit more to modern audiences than, say, for example, if he were to be true to what the Coen brothers were doing in the original film.
Hmm.
And had that as a series, like there's a bit more color, there's a bit more movement, it's a bit more dynamic in the way that everything is kind of shot.
Hmm.
And I feel like it's definitely a fair observation, and it's a worthwhile comparison.
Yeah, visually it may differ somewhat, but I think tonally, in terms of the eccentric characters, the dialogue, the intertwining crime mysteries going on in all four seasons of Fargo, um, it is very much in line and honors the tone of Fargo the film.
Mm,
Season one, season two, season three, and season four all feature amazing casts.
yes.
Season one, Billy Bob Thornton and Martin Freeman star alongside Alison Tolman, Colin Hanks. Amazing cast. Season two had Kristen Dunst, Jesse Plemons, Kieran Culkin, Patrick Wilson, Ted Denson. Season three had Ewan McGregor, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Carrie Coon, David Tillis. Season four, currently right now, stars Chris Rock as the head of a crime syndicate made up of black migrants fleeing the Jim Crow South. So it's a very star-studded series. A lot of big names feel compelled because of Noah Hawley's writing
Hmm.
to get into it. Overall, though, I do feel that no, this is season three and four, and season four isn't finished, so
Yeah.
it's hard to make a reasonable judgment on it.
Hmm.
But I think season one and two easily the strongest of the Fargo anthologies.
Yeah.
Um, I think Billy Bob Thornton's Lon Malvo, one of the greatest characters I've seen on TV, at least one of the greatest hitmen. Martin Freeman, such a shit heel of a character. And then season two, improbably, I think actually quite improbably, one ups season one as one of
Yep.
as the best Fargo season.
Hmm.
I think Kristen Dunst and Jesse Plemons' dynamic as a weird a couple caught in between crime syndicates is very cool. There is a King Lear like arrangements
Hmm.
of ambitious siblings in a criminal family rounding it up. And what Fargo has sort of become, rather than a small intimate uh, crime drama set in Fargo,
Yeah.
is kind of become the sprawling tableau of American Midwest crime syndicates
Hmm. Hmm.
that feels very lived in, that feels very funny, and just overall, it's a very engrossing show. Even at its weaker moments in season three and four, it's still entertaining at the very least because
Yeah.
of Holly's visual polish.
I totally agree. I think for me, season one is still my favorite, right? Just generally speaking, the way that Billy Bob Thornton and Martin Freeman play off each other is just like a joy to watch, right? And
Hmm.
just like how everything like that unfolds.
Yep.
Season two, I again agree with you. Definitely much stronger than the
Hmm.
first two seasons. Um, Kristen Dunst puts on a phenomenal, and to me at least, a very surprising performance.
It's
Uh,
different. You know her from Bring It On and
yeah,
things like that.
yeah, exactly. Like I wasn't expecting that, and
Yeah.
I do feel like I thoroughly enjoyed both seasons one and two. More so than three and four, but I have to say, like Ewan McGregor in season three is just amazing.
Playing twins, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so good. I think that carried a lot of season three for me.
Hmm.
As opposed, it didn't feel, yeah, his performance felt like it carried most of season three for me. Uh, I didn't feel like the rest of the cast were as compelling
Mm.
as the cast from season one and two.
Mm-hmm.
And season 4 is kind of its own thing.
Yep.
It's interesting, right? It's refreshing to see Chris Rock in a role like that.
Mm.
But of course, it's not done yet, and I haven't really caught that much of it. But I read like a lot of fans aren't particularly keen because it doesn't really stay true to what they envision the series is supposed to be.
Mm.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts about that? Actually.
Well, I mean, I do think that Fargo has a different flavor every season,
Uh huh.
and of course they're all set in different time periods. Season 2 set in the 70s, for example. Season 4 goes back even further. It's set in the 1950s. It's about warring crime syndicates, each made up of different migrant communities: the Jewish community, the Italian community, the Black community. Are sort of at war, lah. And it's a rather more subdued story about the roots of capitalism,
Mm-hmm.
which is a bit more thematically ambitious
Yeah.
than the first three seasons, or even the Coen Brothers film. I am yet to see whether it will, of course, stick their landing.
Mm-hmm.
It has a bit of a more subdued tone, a bit of a more sprawling cast. It has
Yeah.
more on its mind than the crimes and character studies of the first three seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely sure that Noah Hawley can pull it off because I've never seen him do something like this, something a bit more of a political and societal allegory,
Yeah.
rather than just a fun story.
Mm.
So I don't know. I do know that Hawley is a bit of a hit and miss kind of
Yeah.
showrunner. Legion season 1 amazing, Legion season 2 not so much. Fargo first two seasons were great. Season 3,
Mm.
it's good,
Mm. Yeah.
not great. So I don't know. Season 4 might be the one where he misses, but I think overall, uh, his track record has more hits than misses. So I'm leaning towards being cautiously optimistic that this might be a great season.
Yeah.
And if he can really coalesce and cohere all the themes that he wants to talk about, capitalism, racism, into a fun story, I say why not lah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It certainly is ambitious, right? And it's kind of amazing how, like for the original movie, all right, they
yeah,
call it what did they call it? A homespun murder mystery, right? For it to go to a homespun murder mystery, as you've said, into kind of like this very full, very rich world,
mm,
filled with all sorts of stories and all sorts of characters. And I believe Joe Cohen was talking about just having like a archive or an encyclopedia or book of all of Midwest true crime.
yep.
And it really has kind of like coalesced into that. Uh and it's been a fun ride. I've really, really enjoyed what's been putting out so far. Some more than others for sure, but all around like solid stuff.
Yeah, I mean the four seasons so far have been met with relative critical acclaim, different levels, of course, but all are generally well received. I think that the atmosphere, style, and location, the accents is a big part of Fargo.
Mm,
Also,
mm,
really makes it a worthy expansion, lah. And despite the weakness of season 3 and 4, which are only weak relative to season 1 and 2,
yeah.
I think taken on their own and without comparing, they're still strong seasons. I think Fargo, the TV show, is definitely worth a watch. And the Coen brothers are on the record, and I assume them to be telling the truth on this, that they're proud of Fargo, the TV show.
Hmm.
You know, the Coen brothers themselves are kind of hit and miss filmmakers, but I think they admire, much like myself. I think they admire ambition,
Yeah.
rather than consistency. Like no, Hawley is swinging big every season with different tones, different palettes, different characters, different quirks. He swings big, and when you're taking such big creative risks, you can't be expected to have 100% betting average, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I would rather you take big swings and miss hard, rather than it being boring and safe and consistent.
Hmm.
I don't want Fargo to be yet another crime procedural that you will find on NBC. I don't want it to be Criminal Minds or Law and Order. CSI. No, this to those shows they're consistent, but
Yeah.
they're giving you the same thing every week. It's bland TV dinners, lah, so to speak.
Hmm.
And Fargo is like this chef's creation. This gastronomy kind of like mix of ingredients might not always work, but he's trying to give you something special, and I really admire that about Noah Hawley, lah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I think. I mean, like as much as of a disappointment Legion season 2 was, right? Like you
Yeah,
can't take away from the fact that Legion season 1 was phenomenal,
yeah,
and very very bold, and it's something that we hadn't seen at that point in time when
yeah.
it came out, as far as the superhero genre slash the X-Men stuff went.
Mm-hmm.
So long as he continues to kind of like dream big and continues to kind of write these sort of very ardent bold love letters to the things that he loves, right?
Mm-hmm.
In one case X-Men, in the other case Fargo.
Mm.
I think he will continue to and continue to put good stuff on the table, and like that's more than I can ask for.
Right, yeah. I mean, looking at Legion already, like it seems to have inspired WandaVision, which is coming out on Disney Plus.
Mm,
If you've seen the trailer, it feels very Legion-esque.
yeah.
So, Noah Hawley is starting to have an influence on other filmmakers, which is interesting because Noah Hawley is a very Tarantino-esque filmmaker in the sense that so much of his flourishes are borrowed, shall we say, from other styles. It's
Yeah.
just he has so many influences and he stuffs them all together in this perfectly mixed cocktail that
Hmm.
it becomes intoxicating. I think Fargo, the TV show, is menacing and suspenseful, has surprising notes of hilarious satire and pulpy violence, much like Fargo, the film. But it elevates it with a larger story,
Hmm.
a larger cast, a more sprawling um, scope, I
Mm.
would say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a number of callbacks to Saber. If you watch the film, there are some callbacks to the film. In fact, a particular narrative twist in season one is a direct nod to the film because
Hmm.
the buried money in the snow from the film is uncovered in season one. So it does take place in the same universe. But if you haven't seen Fargo the film, you can jump into Fargo the TV show very easily
Yeah.
and not get lost at all.
Hmm.
Although why would you do that? The film is great. You should watch both.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you don't have to, but we would highly recommend it. Right, just so you
Yeah,
can understand, like, there's a greater appreciation for what Holly's trying to do once you've watched the original film.
yeah.
And yeah, yeah, I highly recommend everything that has the Fargo name with it up to this point, anyway.
Hmm.
And hoping to see whether or not season 4 sticks it.
Definitely. But I think overall, Fargo the show definitely lives up to the Coen Brothers masterpiece.
Hmm.
It's simply delectable. You can enjoy the odd, sour, frightening, hilarious, splendid thing in front of you.
Yeah.
Whether it works or not depends on the circumstances. But in general, you got to admire the creative verve, the crackling energy of Fargo and Noah Hawley's style.
Hmm.
And even if you don't, even if you think it's a little too cute for you, the character work is quite splendid
Yeah.
there as well.
Hmm.
There's something quietly magical about Fargo the show and Fargo the film. Definitely highly recommended, and a worthy continuation of the Coen Brothers franchise,
Absolutely.
which unexpectedly a franchise lah.
Yeah,
What
I
what?
did.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't think that there would be a spin-off series. Very, very honestly, like it's of all the stuff that the Coen Brothers have done, I didn't. Yeah, I wouldn't have put Fargo to be the one thing that got a spin-off.
Definitely, you're right. But if it works, it works. I wonder if Holly has ever had thoughts to spin off other things from the Coen Brothers. Like a No Country for Old Men spin off or something.
That would be
It,
interesting.
it not necessary, but if it's done well, I can't fault it.
Hmm.
What is not necessary is Netflix's spin-off created by Ryan Murphy called Ratched. It is inspired and a prequel to the 1976 classic film One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest,
Hmm.
which starred the amazing Jack Nicholson as a new patient at a mental institution. Of course, Jack Nicholson's character, Randall McMurphy, is something happens to him in the film. He is kind of abused in the mental asylum
Hmm.
by an evil nurse called Nurse Ratched. So that's where Ratched gets his name from. It's a prequel on the evil nurse, which is well, okay. Before we get into get into Ratchet, let's talk about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
Yeah.
Nest first. The amazing 1975 American drama film.
Hmm.
I think one of Jack Nicholson's best performances to
Easily.
date.
Yeah. Easily.
It's right up there with his shining performance.
Hmm.
And he is fantastic. And its portrayal of um mental illness
Mm-hmm.
in the 1970s and the lack of understanding in American institutions, in mental hospitals about what mental illness is, was very illuminating, very shocking, very provocative. Randall McMurphy, the character that Jack Nicholson plays, is not mentally ill. He is a prisoner for a violent crime, that doesn't want to do hard labor, so he's faking, being crazy, so he gets sent to the madhouse and gets to chill out for the rest of his sentence. But while he's there, he starts interacting with a bunch of weirdos, with a bunch of people with mental illnesses of varying degrees,
Mm-hmm.
and because of the way that he treats them, he's human to them. He treats them like friends. He plays basketball with them. He breaks them out, not to break them out, but to to take them to take them fishing. He starts to bring these introverted and broken people out of their shells, and offers them a way to a, a path to therapy,
Mm-hmm.
that is much better than the lobotomies, than the electric shock therapies, than the harsh discipline of the mental hospital of Nurse Ratched.
Yeah.
It's an interesting little allegory for, at least I think, like, what I got from it was sort of like a chamber drama allegory for the culture wars of the
Mm-hmm.
70s.
Mm-hmm.
The traditionalism of Nurse Ratched versus the more warm, humane radicalism of McMurphy. And I think that is what One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is. Do you get the same vibe, or do you see something different in this film?
I mean, certainly. Hmm. Yeah. So I agree with you. Like mostly how everything is kind of portrayed, right? Like for at that point in time with where psychiatry was,
Yeah.
and kind of like finding its feet and kind of but devoid of humanity, right?
Yep.
Devoid of
Yep.
the understanding that at the end of the day, yes, these people are sick, but they're not just
It's it's
patients; they are
it's
human as well. Mm-hmm.
it's focused on order and discipline, right? Not on the
Yeah,
people suffering,
yeah.
right?
So
Yeah.
they're not people who are meant to be cured as much as they are people who are meant to be controlled and kept under control. Where
Mm-hmm.
which is embodied in Mildred Ratched, right?
Yep.
And like for that to kind of have that duality between the two, right? That underpins the entire movie between McMurphy's approach to life, just in general, right? His carefreeness, his disdain for authority, and
Mm-hmm.
pitched up against Nurse Ratched,
Yep.
really kind of like makes the movie what it is. And I think
Mm-hmm.
my main issue with Ratched, the TV series, is that McMurphy doesn't exist there.
Well,
Yeah,
it is a prequel.
yeah, it is a prequel for sure, and I kind of gone in to um watching the first couple of episodes, which is all I gave it really,
Yeah.
uh thinking that, okay, you know what, she's formidable by the time we watch One Flies Over the Cuckoo's
One
Nest, right?
Flew Over the Cuckoo's
Yeah,
Nest.
One
Yeah.
Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And like it really is the kind of battle of wits and wills in the
Mm-hmm.
film that make it what it is, and I really wanted to kind of see her, like, so she's new, she's coming in, and just slowly kind of cement that kind of formidable presence, and why all her quirks are like that, and like how does she really gonna get under people's skin, how does she
Mm-hmm.
become the powerhouse that she becomes in the
The
film
movie.
itself,
Yeah.
and we don't get that, like by and large, it's just, oh man, it's a very good looking series, right?
It's very Ryan Murphy, I would
Yeah,
say.
it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, exactly. It's very very Ryan Murphy. It's a gorgeous looking series,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't have. There are a lot of. It's very salacious in ways that I don't think it needs to be. Right? There are a lot
Very
of kind
Ryan
of,
Murphy. Yeah.
yeah, very a lot of plot holes all over the place. That just
Yeah.
don't make sense, and again, unnecessary, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
characterizations aren't nuanced in any way. Like it's completely opposite of what I want to see um, out of the film, right? Like you take the premise of the film, which is interesting, sure, but you only take half of it, right?
Yeah.
And then you kind of like that's all. You discard everything else, and that's the problem I have with Ratchet right now.
I think Ratched is a very garish, outrageous soap opera, in tone with other Ryan Murphy shows,
Mm,
and in providing an origin story for Nurse Ratched, who was always much more of a symbol, a symbolic representation
Yeah.
of a certain uh, of traditionalism of the culture war of the 1970s.
Hmm.
She was a symbol, not a character, and so an origin story sort of misses the point of Nurse Ratched by a country mile.
Yeah.
It's really outrageous. It's ridiculous. The series itself, I haven't seen all of it. I've seen maybe half of it.
Hmm.
But I tapped out. The it doesn't really seem to care about the message of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest
Hmm.
so much as it gives Ryan Murphy an IP to build another Ryan Murphy show about. This is just another American Horror Story, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much, right? Like it has all the flash and the zazz, but like none of the deeper kind of like meatiness that we got from the film. Like it's all smoke and mirrors,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
there's the symbol of a person who is a symbol of how society grinds down individuals,
Hmm.
in the name of conformity. And I suppose explaining how she got to that point or why she identifies with that point of view might be interesting in the hands of a different auteur
Yeah.
than Ryan Murphy,
Yeah.
who is honestly, to this point, with maybe the exception of Post, which he doesn't show run. Post is run by someone else.
Yeah.
Maybe with the exception of that, you look at every other Ryan Murphy show, which has its merits. Its merits are not characterization. Its merits are not political allegory. Its merits are not intelligence. Its merit is flash
Hmm.
and pizzazz. And I think Ryan Murphy's track record on Netflix has just been utterly disappointing. He was paid $500 million to be exclusive to Netflix. So
Oh my god.
the $500 million is not to make his shows. It's $500 million is to him personally, so that he will be exclusive to Netflix from now on. And the shows that he has made, Ratched, Hollywood, The Politician, have all been truly, truly terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at least with Nip Tuck, right? It kind of treads guilty pleasure territory,
Hmm,
but we can't say the same, right? For kind of almost anything else that he's
yeah,
done. Yeah.
I mean, Nip Tuck was kind of before. A lot of filmmakers and creators are like this after they find success. They sort of lean into all of their indulgences. They become a bit
Hmm.
more indulgent. And Ryan Murphy has gone. Uh, it doesn't care anymore. Like he doesn't care about editing himself.
Yeah.
Like this is him truly. He doesn't edit himself. He doesn't trust other people to edit him. And Ratchet is probably the most Ryan Murphy thing I've ever seen, for better and for worse, mostly for worse.
Yeah.
And the thing that bothers me about Ratchet is just that it does the legacy of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest so dirty.
Hmm.
It doesn't understand it. It doesn't try to understand it.
Yeah.
I and part of me questions why he would use this IP to make a series like this. He could easily make an Asylum series.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
It didn't have to be Nurse Ratched, right?
think about it. How much of today's audience, your 18 to 25, the prime demographic that they're aiming for,
Hmm.
how many of them have seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Very few, I would reckon.
Yeah, but on the flip side, if it does inspire them to watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, hey, then I guess there is a point to the show, to
Well,
introduce them to something better.
and then they realize that the series that they've been watching is absolute crap.
Mm,
Yeah, sure. I mean, it works out, I guess, that way. It really just kind of like bothers me, right? Like why they allowed the rights to Ryan Murphy. From what
yeah,
I understand, it took him a fair amount of time to fight for it, right?
yep,
But like he hasn't done anything close to that caliber
no,
ever, right? And if I was in charge of the rest, I'll just like no. Sorry,
no.
right? It's like no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's weird. Like Ryan Murphy does have a slew of great shows under his belt.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong. Prior to Netflix, at least, you got Glee, you got Popular, you got Nip Tuck, and Pose, which is on Netflix, which is produced by Ryan Murphy, but Ryan Murphy did nothing on that show besides direct the pilot.
Yeah.
But those are exceptions. Ryan Murphy is like, I think he's like Shonda Rhimes at this point, like kind of a factory of ideas that he doesn't really work on. But you can see from the tone of Ratched that this is pure Ryan Murphy, like, that he's
Hmm.
very involved in the show, and I think it's very it's a joke, like all the torture and homicide and the odd uh, soap opera quality to Ratched
Yeah,
is very Ryan Murphy and very One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
yeah,
Star fuck what was the name, what's the lead actress name, Sarah Paulson.
yeah. Sarah
Sarah
Paulson.
Paulson, who is a Ryan Murphy favorite, and she's been in a
Mm.
lot of other things as well, has said that the show is building up to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in season 4, she was saying.
In
uh
season 4.
and I'm just gonna flat out say no one's gonna wait for season 4, man.
I didn't make it past 3 episodes.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Yeah, it really is very upsetting actually.
Hmm.
I Because I just rewatched One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest before I hit it in the Ratchet, and
Mm.
like I couldn't. I really couldn't.
We mentioned Hannibal earlier. Brian Fuller was on record saying that his final season was going to be Silence of the Lambs, lah.
Yeah.
But in that particular case, I would have been okay with just delving into the prequel. I didn't need to make it to the big film touchstone.
Hmm.
Like I was okay because Brian Murphy is a great Brian Fuller is a great director. He's a great writer. So I was very cool with just watching this new take on Hannibal by Mads Mikkelsen.
Yeah.
The very meaty dynamic between Will Graham and Hannibal was more than enough to carry the show.
Agreed.
Sadly cancelled. If Netflix wants to invest in anything, bring back Age of Resistance, bring back Hannibal, bring back Glow. There's so many other shows that are worth your money
Hmm.
than Ratched, which even devoid. Let's say Ratched wasn't attached to one of the best films of all time.
Yep.
It's still a bad show taken on its own context.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's kind of Netflix's problem, right? Like they don't necessarily want long-running shows because those have
Yeah,
established fan bases that may or may not get more people to sign up for Netflix, right? They want the flashy and the new stuff, and they don't really care if it lasts for very long, you
very
know?
few shows last beyond 4 seasons on Netflix. It's been proven that,
Yeah.
like, the exceptions are the special ones.
Hmm.
Orange is the New Black is a show that went on to 7 seasons, but I think Netflix feels a real depth of gratitude to Orange is the New Black, considering that Orange is the New Black was their first show.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's their baby lah. And even, oh man, it's so crazy to think about, like, just 7 years ago, the first streaming show came on Netflix in Orange is the New Black, and then House of Cards with
Yeah.
Kevin Spacey,
Hmm.
he who should not be named. Um, and just 7 years later, they're like, I'm looking up here, 200,000 streaming shows.
Yeah. It's
It's
insane.
fucking crazy,
It's
and
insane.
no wonder in that saturated landscape, Netflix can't afford to have a show go beyond 4 seasons lah. Shows like BoJack Horseman and The Crown are the exception, not the rule. I
Hmm.
would say.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I totally understand that. I mean, let's if we take a look at um shows that have done well by their own metric, right? Take for
Mhm.
example, Altered Carbon,
Mm,
right? Didn't pass 2 seasons. I mean, like given season 2 was horrible,
yeah.
right? But that's exactly what they're looking for. They want the flash. They want it to be something new. They want good-looking people on there. A lot of hype, a lot of marketing over there, so people will renew their Netflix subscription just to catch
Mm,
that, right? But even then, by their own measure, like those shows don't make it. Like, why not put money into shows that have true quality and have shown
mm,
true quality instead of just kind of like letting people be disappointed by the fact that you gave something really good a shot,
mm.
but nothing past the first season or the second season.
Like, this has almost nothing to do with our topics, but whenever you scroll past Netflix, right? Do you ever see, like, the top 10 in Singapore list
Yeah, I
and
do.
feel like disappointed?
Yes, a lot of the time. Although that being said, sometimes there's an interesting. I'm like, really? That's on the top
Mm,
10, and I'll go click it, and it turns out it's a pretty fun watch, right?
mm-hmm.
But that is so rare. That's
Yeah.
really, really so rare. Or even the column that says like now trending on Netflix. I'm like, really? Are you
Some
serious?
and then you start to realize, right, that people like hokey shit, and maybe we're the exception, and which is probably true, lah.
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point because how ubiquitous Netflix is. Like people are really looking for stuff that doesn't require you to think because Netflix just runs in the background.
Mm.
And especially in a time like this where a lot of us are still stuck at home, right, for large periods of time. You've got other shit to do, right? And you just need something to kind of fill the space in the house, or in your room, and you don't want something that maybe is really good, but you can't pay attention to it. You just want something that is like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I literally caught like 2 minutes of screen throughout the entire time I was doing my work or cleaning my house, whatever it is, and I understood exactly what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. If you would like a show like that, we do have to recommend the Midnight Gospel.
Oh yeah.
As something that you really don't have to watch, and you can do it while. Essentially, it's a podcast. It's a recreation of a podcast done visually through, I forgot his name, Pendleton. He was a
Yeah.
showrunner for Adventure Time.
Hmm.
He basically, tacks on fantasy visuals onto real podcast conversations. It's something that you can watch or not watch and just listen to.
Hmm.
And sometimes you look up and you see crazy things happening, like a unicorn going through a meat grinder or things like that. Um, Amazing. Like if you want to watch things like that, you can.
Yeah.
But I'm really sad. Age of Resistance, for example, got cancelled the day it won an Emmy.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
day it won an Emmy, like, oh,
Yeah.
couldn't you have done it on a day that the cast and the crew were not celebrating, and then pushed their hopes down? It's disappointing.
Yeah.
And then Ratched debuts, and I'm like wondering what is Netflix investing their money in? Uh, but what do I know? Like, I'm not a businessman. I'm just a
Yeah.
TV critic. And maybe they do know what they're doing. They clearly do, like, they clearly do know what they're doing because they're in the business to make money.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
uh,
and they still
yeah.
have the lion's share of the market right at the moment. But
Mm,
given everything that kind of like is coming up, right? I think Disney Plus has a huge push towards having some great content.
mm,
And let's be honest, like how many streaming services are you going to maintain at one time?
mm-hmm,
Like two, maybe two, right? And like if Disney kind of pushes forward with the fact that they have all the nostalgia that you want in old Disney classics, as
mm-hmm,
well as like all the new Marvel stuff that's coming out. Like,
mm-hmm,
there's a strong I feel like if they don't um ditch this current kind of like strategy to make sure there's always new flashy things and only the new flashy things,
mm-hmm.
Netflix might kind of see it come back to bite them in the ass.
I do agree. In fact, I actually think if you live in America, I actually think the best shows of 2020 did not come from Netflix. Although they,
Mm,
they have the standouts. They came from Amazon Prime and they
yeah,
come from Hulu.
yeah, yeah.
Hulu in particular has Shrill, has Pen 15, has Normal People. I think those were some of the best shows of the year.
Hmm.
And they were not Netflix lah.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I mean you've seen Pen 15, and by the way, season 2 is back. If you listen to our original podcast, season 2 is back for the first 6 episodes or
Hmm.
7 episodes. The season has been split into two, and I think Pen 15 is still one of the best shows on streaming right now.
Yeah.
If you want to listen to our review, go back to our Mixcloud page. Look for it. It was not that long ago. It's just a couple of months ago. We talked about season 1 of Pen 15.
Hmm.
One of the best, most cringe-worthiest, uncomfortably truthful tween female comedies that you can find anywhere. So yeah, I would suggest you watch Pen 15 rather than Ratchet.
Hmm.
Or if you don't want to watch Ratchet, please go watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
Um, One of the most iconic films of the 70s and really embodies the culture clash of the 70s, like the culture wars of the 70s. And given that the culture wars of the 70s, it's kind of being replayed in 2020. There is a new culture war of a similar vein that feels like it's going to break out into a civil war. It actually feels like, rather timely.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, One thing that did confuse me, though, moving on. One thing that confused me a couple of months ago. Did you notice that everyone on your Facebook and everyone on your Instagram and Twitter suddenly started talking about Cobra Kai,
Yeah.
and I was perplexed. Not that I don't want people watching Cobra Kai. I love Cobra Kai. The thing was, I was confused because Cobra Kai came out on YouTube Red 4 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, and I was like, why are so many people suddenly talking about Cobra Kai now in 2020? In the last 2 months of 2020, and I was like, I don't understand this. Did people suddenly get a free account to YouTube? Is that what they were offering? Turns out no. I went on Netflix, and then uh, Cobra Kai was added to Netflix.
Hmm.
In fact, it's now a Netflix show. Cobra Kai was cancelled by YouTube Red,
Yeah.
picked up by Netflix. And suddenly you're talking about the ubiquity of Netflix, right? How everyone has Netflix, but maybe the other streaming services are not as popular as of yet.
Yeah.
It truly gave Cobra Kai a new lease on life,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and suddenly it became the talk of the town, which is why I wanted to include Cobra Kai here. If you're not familiar, Cobra Kai is based on the 1984. I use this term loosely. Martial arts drama. Uh, it's based on the original Cobra Kai, like the Mr. Miyagi Cobra Kai, not on the Will Smith, Jaden Smith Karate Kid, which had kung fu instead of karate.
Yeah.
Bizarre, by the way, bizarre. Like they went to Japan to learn. No,
The-
wait. They went to Japan to
yep.
learn kung fu, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Which which is not karate, lah. Like kung fu is number one. It's a Chinese martial art. It has nothing to do with Japan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, anyways, let's not talk about that rebooted Karate Kid. Although I do notice that Will Smith is a producer on Cobra Kai. If you look at the credits, the 1984 Karate Kid has several sequels, but I think none of them were as good as the first Karate Kid.
Mm-hmm.
Which follows Daniel LaRusso, played by Ralph Macchio, a teenager taught karate by Mr. Miyagi to help defend himself and compete in a tournament, the Valley High tournament, against one of his bullies, lah.
Yeah.
One of which is the ex-boyfriend of his current love interest, um, uh, played by Elizabeth Shue, Ali Melis, I believe that's the name.
Mm-hmm.
And it became a camp 80s icon, basically. I've seen the Karate Kid several times on Channel 5. It stood the test of time. Dude, I haven't watched the Karate Kid since I was in secondary school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I guarantee you I can quote every line there. I remember it so well. Get him a body bag, sweep the leg, Johnny, shit like that. Like it's entrenched in my head. Like, was Karate Kid as big a part of your childhood as it was for mine?
I just remember watching it a number of times on TV, right? Like
Yeah.
late night TV. And like the images are just kind of ingrained in my mind. And I don't think it was until maybe, yeah, probably like late secondary school, maybe about 15 or 16, when I sat down to watch it in its entirety and then like finally committed that as a
Mm-hmm.
film to memory, instead of having like just kind of like these iconic scenes like stepping out at me.
Yeah.
Just like some of the lines, right, have become so
Wax
ingrained,
on, wax off.
wax on, wax off, and all of that. The references to it in like oh no, what was it, Community, for example.
Yeah.
And
I think every comedy has parodied the Karate Kid at one
yeah,
point in time.
right, like, and just like it just shows like how culturally important it became, right,
Mm.
kind of over time. And
Karate became the most popular sport in the US in the 80s because of the film.
I didn't know that. That's well, okay, I didn't know that.
Suddenly, like every fucking karate dojo in every strip mall in America, started getting like signups.
That's amazing. That
Yeah.
that really is, yeah, that really is quite something.
But yeah, it's strange to say, but Karate Kid has had this lasting influence, and its sequels to varying degrees
Yeah.
were okay. Like some were good, some were not. I would say Karate Kid 3 probably not the best. The one with Hilary Swank, the rebooted one, not rebooted one. Hilary Swank as Miyagi's new teacher. I think that was pretty good. I like that one
The
too.
next Karate Kid, is that the
The
one?
next Karate Kid,
Yeah.
that's the one. Yeah, next Karate Kid. That was pretty good. And yet, like shockingly, I think 30-ish years later,
Mhm.
the show is revived as a television series on YouTube Red, a fledgling. As we mentioned, it's not a Netflix production, by the way. It's a YouTube production,
Yeah.
a fledgling streaming service, which is basically based on a How I Met Your Mother joke. If you have never seen How I Met Your Mother, Barney Stinson, through several episodes, makes a very compelling case that Johnny Lawrence was the true hero of the
Yeah,
Karate
yeah.
Kid, and the misunderstood hero, whereas what was his name?
Daniel.
Whereas Daniel was
Yeah.
actually the antagonist of the film. He points out several things that the show really makes use of. He points out that the crane kick at the All Valley Karate Tournament is illegal.
Yeah.
Look it up. You can't kick to the face in karate tournaments. Johnny, who punched Daniel in the face earlier in the match, was deducted a point and given a warning. So how is it that Daniel can win a match by landing a kick on the face without costing him a point or without being disqualified?
Mhm.
Like, I get it. Daniel rolls into town from New Jersey, steals this guy's girlfriend. How is he not supposed to be upset, right?
Yeah.
So these are all the things that originated from Barney Stinson. Amazingly, they picked up on the idea and decided to make a sequel show set some 30 years later that subverts the Karate Kid's dynamics by making Johnny Lawrence your lovable anti-hero
Mhm.
by portraying Daniel as essentially the bully in this instance. Daniel has grown up to become a successful car dealer.
Yeah.
He is rich. He has a hot wife. He lives in a big mansion. He has kids. Whereas Johnny still hung up on his All Valley Karate tournament loss 30 years ago, is living like a bum. He's divorced. He's estranged from his son. He's living paycheck to paycheck, and stuff like that, lah. I thought there was a very limited idea that maybe would have made a great sketch comedy, kind
Yeah.
of like 10-minute kind of sketch comedy act. For them to actually uh, for them to I don't know, take it and actually make it more than a solid show, a show with actual depth,
Mhm.
with great characters, with excellent fight scenes. That yes, still uses the crutch of nostalgia, but doesn't rely on the nostalgia. It really pushes beyond that to make it into a good show. It's astounding to me. I'm constantly astonished when I think of Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
This should not have worked, and yet it has become one of my favorite shows of the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I totally agree with you there. Like it just I still remember when you first told me about Cobra Kai, right? Like
Yeah,
how many years has it been actually since it was in
like
YouTube?
3 or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years, right? And I remember sitting there thinking, really? Are you
Mhm.
serious? That's what they're doing? And of course, to have the actual actors come back, right?
Yeah.
To kind of play the roles. So like it's amazing what they've done. Like really, really, truly kind of mind blowing for them to take a premise like that, right? So small, it's kind of a throwaway joke, and make it so compelling, because we get to see something that has cultural significance, right? Like in pop culture at least, kind of
Yeah.
get second life, but not just that, but enhance and deepen the world and the characters that inhabit it
Hmm.
in a way that completely, I mean, no one would have thought, right?
Hmm.
I think that that Cobra Kai would have worked, and in addition to that, for it to come on Netflix and then become as popular as it is right now, like it's kind of mind
Hmm.
blowing, and a
Yeah.
testament to how good it is.
Yeah. I mean, if Cobra Kai was just a tale of how Daniel and his high school nemesis Johnny is training the next generation of karate kids, right? It would have been shameless pandering.
Yeah.
At times, effective pandering because Makio and Zetka really commit to their most famous roles here,
Yeah.
but not something capable of filling out um, 2 seasons
Yeah.
of story. There's barely enough material here, as I was saying, for a 10-minute comedy shot. Yet somehow Cobra Kai, who are actually created by Harold and Kumar's writers, John Hurwitz and Hayden Schlossberg, keeps surpassing all reasonable expectations.
Hmm.
Every time I thought the idea had exhausted its usefulness, the story took another turn,
Yeah.
or another character dynamic came into play, and I just wanted to see more of it. I wouldn't exactly call it high art.
No.
Uh, in part because the appeal rests enormously on your level of knowledge and affection for the original movie.
Hmm.
Like take for example Creed, right? Like you could enjoy Creed without watching Rocky
Yeah.
if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You couldn't enjoy Cobra Kai without watching Karate Kid.
No, you
So,
wouldn't. Yeah, you'd be pretty lost, honestly.
yeah, but at the same time, if you did watch Karate Kid, this is compulsively watchable, actually legitimately emotionally engaging with
Hmm.
nuanced
Hmm.
characters, and almost always one step ahead of where you think it's going. One of the things that I really wanted to point out, like one of the famous line that I said earlier, have you seen season 2 of Cobra Kai? I don't want to spoil it for you.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I have.
Okay, so spoiler alert for season 2 of Cobra Kai, like the kid who says, "Get him a body bag," that kid, his last scene in Cobra Kai season 2 is being him dying in a motorcycle accident,
Yeah.
and then being zipped up in a body bag. It made me cry. Oh my god! Like what a great ending for that character.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And I never thought like you could have a redemption arc for Johnny Lawrence, let alone the rest of the Cobra Kai crew. And then Johnny's hatred for his old sensei and everything coming back into play. Daniel being presented this way, this modern incarnation of Daniel 30 years later,
Yeah.
feels so natural. Like it's not a reach or anything. Like I could easily see Daniel getting this way.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. And one additional thing that I really kind of enjoy about Cobra Kai is just like the kind of they hit the nail on the head as far as it goes with martial arts, right? The whole idea of like you having a student and your loyalty to your dojo and like what's your lineage and all of that, like all of those
Hmm.
things are played to really really good effect,
Hmm.
because those things do exist, right, in martial arts. Um, and and it's played to great effect a lot of the time, not just for laughs but also for the fact that it deepens the characters relationships and therefore conflicts. That's
Yeah.
something that happened like uh it's something that happened like 30 years ago, continues to be relevant, right, in people's lives today. And it's crazy how that kind of affects a much wider community of characters than just the two.
I think a lot of the comedy of the show also has been updated to contextualize millennial and Gen Z sensibilities.
Mm, mm.
I think Johnny Lawrence, being the Gen Xer that he is, he is all about, he doesn't believe that allergies exist. He's not aware of the new vocabulary that these kids have, the sensitivities that they have, and things like that, like. And it's played for really big laughs.
Yeah, yeah.
And just the idea of Johnny training a crew of nerds and geeks who are getting bullied to defend themselves was already an interesting idea, and then it flips it on its head some more because of the toxic ways that he teaches these kids.
Yeah.
They actually become bullies. They start being, like Hawk, for example, the kid with the lip.
Yeah.
He starts being the worst of them. It's such a great turn and twist, and then you start rooting for Daniel again.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with Daniel's crew, who Daniel also training his son. What a training Johnny's son. What a great twist,
Yeah.
man. This show continues to hit like so many great beats. The season finale of season 2 on YouTube Red came out the same year that we reviewed the Defenders, right? You watched the
Yep.
Defenders to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it came out the same year, right? And then I believe if you listen to our genre equality review of Defenders, um, the final fight sequence in the Defenders, truly one of the most horrendously short fight sequences to Wu Tang clans. Wu Tang ain't nothing to fuck with, right?
Yeah.
Um, Horribly shot, terrible one take sequence. And then on the flip side, on the same month, Cobra Kai season 2, the finale, the single take sequence in the halls of the school where a karate brawl breaks out between the two factions was outstanding. One of the best fight action sequences I saw that year. And to think that it came from this comedy show crouching on nostalgia to deliver a fight sequence like that, this show amazes me on all levels, man. Like the fight sequences are good,
Yeah.
and that brawl was the height of that show.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I really definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, a lot of you may be wondering where I was going with the Defenders analogy. That I
Yeah.
remember watching the two shows back to back. I'm like thinking, what Karate Kid? This Karate Kid show did this on like what 1/8 of your budget,
Yeah.
and still made it work and made it look like a brutal but fun brawl, which ends tragically, by the way. I'm not going to spoil how it ends
Mm-hmm.
for those who haven't seen it, but it sets up a very very good season 3, which is why it was very sad when YouTube Red, not a successful streaming service, YouTube Red has since been closed down.
Yeah.
Um, they canceled Cobra Kai, and I was like, oh no, we're not going to find out the conclusion to the cliffhanger. Thank God Netflix, I know I shit on them earlier, but thank God, credit to you Netflix. This is why I still sign up. Netflix saved Cobra Kai, brought it back, and kudos to them. Also bought the library to Cobra Kai. They didn't just buy the right for season 3. They
Mm-hmm.
bought the rights for season 1 and 2 also, which gave it a whole new audience, as I noticed from my social media, to catch up on Cobra Kai season 1 and 2. And then everybody after they started watching were like, oh no, where's season 3? I hope there's a season 3. Like, motherfucker, I've been waiting like 3 years for season 3.
Yeah.
And it's coming in January 2021. I'm very excited about this in a COVID era where you can't go out. To watch season 3 of Cobra Kai is going to be such a joy, and it's probably going to be a bit more tragic than the comedic first 2 seasons
Mm-hmm.
because of what happens at the end.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to season 3. Are you as well?
Yeah, for sure. I'm hoping it takes a much darker, more dramatic turn.
Hmm.
Because like behind all the laughs and all of that and kind of the general silliness, there is kind of very deep psychological issues that should be dealt with.
Hmm.
and, and
Hmm.
and and should at very least be kind of like mentioned, in a much more like in a much more nuanced way. If they
Yeah.
go that route and they manage to pull that off as well, then like Cobra Kai just continues to grow, right? In terms of the legacy that is creating.
Indeed, indeed. And one of the rare examples of a spin-off actually enhancing the legacy of its original film. Lah.
Mm.
We highly recommend Cobra Kai. As you know, you can watch the first 2 seasons on YouTube, or if you have Netflix, which I'm assuming you do, you can watch the first 2 seasons on Netflix. And then you only have to wait a couple of months for season 3, something that I had to wait 3 years for. So there you go. That was why we wanted to talk about these television spin-offs to iconic films. Some of them are worthy, some of them are not, and some of them improve upon it. How about that? And also, as we mentioned earlier, please do watch Age of Resistance, another example of a prequel, years, decades later,
Mm.
staying true and honoring the aesthetic and tone and legacy of the original, and maybe in some ways, due to modern technology, improving upon it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really, really loved Age of Resistance, Cobra Kai, and Fargo. Do not watch Ratched. Watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, please.
Yeah.
It is a much more valuable watch. And for the next episode of Behold, right? It's spooky season.
Yeah.
And okay, it's spooky season, meaning that every single platform, every single studio is releasing horror stuff. This is nothing to do with the next episode, but if I was looking at my genre equality rundown for next season, for
Mm.
next month,
Yep.
you know, I'm covering like 20 plus shows, and like 15 of them are horror stuff. That
Mm-hmm.
people are obviously that I have been holding for this month, and I'm like, oh, so much of them are not good. So instead of covering regular horror for the next episode of Behold, we'll be talking about meta horror. Yes, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about horror movies that are about
Horror
horror
movies.
movies. Our main topic is The Cabin in the Woods by
Mm.
Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon. One of the more recent examples of meta horror out there that is really smart, that explains and deconstructs and elevates and celebrates the tropes of horror filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
Other titles we'll be talking about. Some of them are older, some of them are newer. We'll be talking about Wes Craven's meta phase in the mid 90s. Wes Craven came out with a film called New Nightmare, which is basically his meta take on Nightmare on Elm
Elm Street.
Street, Freddy
Yeah.
Krueger, where the cast of the Nightmare of Elm Street is haunted by the actual Freddy Krueger. Very interesting meta thing. Of course, the godfather of meta horror is Scream.
Mm-hmm.
The one that everybody talks about. The famous scene where the kid is explaining the rules of horror, what you can and cannot do, how do you survive the serial killer, who is adhering to the rules of horror. Um, Probably the granddaddy of meta horror, like the one that everyone knows about the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we had another topic also. I
One cut
forgot.
of the dead.
One Cut of the Dead, a Japanese quote unquote documentary film about a Japanese film crew filming a zombie movie
Yep.
who are attacked by actual zombies. And then in the second half of the film, you realize that the attack was also staged because they are making a mockumentary of a mockumentary. Uh, one of the most amazing Japanese films, one of the most amazing films of last year. In fact, really, really great. So we're talking about horror movies, about horror movies. They not only hilariously deconstruct the tropes, it's also a Valentine to the tropes of horror filmmaking. They have their cake and eat it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you seen any of next month's topics or the next episode's topics?
Yeah, so I've done Cabin in Woods and One Cut of the Dead already.
Mm-hmm.
Going to rewatch Scream, just
Oh,
because
Scream.
it's been so long. It's been so
Yeah.
long since I took Scream seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I've not watched New Nightmare yet. I'm pretty interested to see where that goes.
New Nightmare. I'm gonna say straight up, like it's not as good as Scream. It's an okay horror film,
Yep.
but it is the first instance I think in horror filmmaking of this type of thing,
Mhm.
where a filmmaker is deconstructing his own films.
Yeah.
So I thought it as like kind of the prototype for all the other films that we're talking about. It was important to include Wes Craven's New Nightmare as well.
Mhm.
And then Wes Craven really like this was like his rough draft for Scream.
Yeah.
You know, like a year later he made Scream, and then he really got it right. I rewatched Scream uh, a couple of weeks ago, and I forgot. I mean, I really forgot that it was so good. I had only seen bits and pieces of Scream here and there on TV, and watching the whole thing with a more adult context. Now I cover horror a lot, right? I
Yeah.
know the tropes a
Yeah.
lot more. I really wonder whether a lot of the stuff flew over people's heads back in 1997 or
Mm-hmm.
1998, whenever it was that came
Mm-hmm.
out. You know, so yeah, we'll be diving into that next episode, man. Really
Yeah.
excited for
Yeah.
that one.
Me too. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Just to have something different to kind of talk about, right? And just like
Mhm.
so much horror going on for our next genre equality.
Yeah, horror about horror. Anyways, this has been this episode of Behold. My name's Hitzer.
I'm Isa.
Goodbye, guys. See you in a couple of weeks.
Ciao.